Hey everybody. So I got a little distracted back there with this Great Dane, Sydney and Nicole, and we were chatting a little bit. Okay, so coming back to what I was talking about, we were talking about tiny living, RVs, van life, choosing select items, being purposeful, having designated spaces, and how each person designs their van for the purposes that they're going out to experience. So this one particular guy had this amazing house that was way like out in the mountains, lots of snow, and he built a tiny house with the rocks that were on the land and lots of glass so that he could see out onto the, snow-covered vistas. And he was like a professional snowboarder, and that would make sense. And his particular design of his place was, again, very unique. I had never seen anything like it. Very simple in, like the basics being met. Very cool fireplace, kind of a stove situation, which was cool. Wood burning stove fireplace. But a lot of his furniture was just rocks and, like a slab of rock with, like hand carved wood seating. And although that was comfortable for him, I'm going to say for me, like I like a little bit more glam and a little bit more luxury. So I like cushions and the choice to have a pillow or two. So the appeal of just sitting on pure concrete or pure stone or pure wood was not very enticing to me. But I thought his design was beautiful. But it just goes to show that we all have a different level of what's functional to us. This other design that was interesting, this woman had taken the idea of, you know how you see those like iron spiral staircases, and she did like a tree design, and she just put little foot pads in a circular motion that took a very small footprint versus your traditional like spiral staircases that are iron. And again, very clever design. It didn't take a lot of space and got you from the first floor to the second story loft. So again, it's always interesting to see what other people have come up with to solve a certain problem or to create more space and openness, so their creativity, marinates on finding out a solution for what's going to work in that space. The other thing that was interesting in coming back to that pop-up tiny house that had all these, slide out kind of pop-up components and the designated spaces, they repurposed a lot of their finds, and some of the things were thrifted, some of the things were curated, some of them were just raw materials that were they either found or repurposed. So when it's possible to do to gather the materials and sometimes you're purchasing certain items because trying to find it maybe is more difficult, and then vice versa. Sometimes you're going on Facebook Marketplace or going to antique shops to find this unique thing that's going to serve the purpose that you have in mind with your idea of inspiration. So sometimes when I just I'm out in my van, I'm using it, and then I'm thinking, how would I like this to be more functional? How would I like my van to be more beautiful? And how would I do that? And so I'm just kind of sitting with that right now. And it also makes me think about my home base in terms of like what specific things I have and what specific things I have used in the past, and then I'm ready to move them on to someone else because, you know, my ideas are changing or my functions are changing from maybe some certain things that were of interest to me before and now not so much. So it was also interesting how even within all of these tiny spaces, whether it was an RV, a tiny house, a van, a trailer, or there were even homes that I was watching that were, I forget the name, it was in Sweden, I believe, that were like kind of dug into the ground. So like kind of like an earth house. Half the house was showing and peeking through, and the other portion of the house was underneath the earth, and very small spaces, like kind of like a one-room living situation with a fireplace. And all of these places, you know, what was interesting was, again, to notice how at least in the tiny house, you know, conversation, that meaning physically something that is stationary and it's not moving anywhere, it's just staying put in one location. And, you know, you think about the old school, you know, old log cabins and, you know, these earth houses and this idea of, you know, the materials that you're using to build, that there's a purpose in these heavy, you know, piles of stones against one another, because the stones are being heated up by the sun during the day, and then, you know, or providing the coolness as well, so depending on the temperatures. And, you know, that the fireplaces would store the energy of the heat from the fireplace and the wood burning stove. And, you know, all of these things, it's like, obviously our ancestors and the people that went before us were smart enough to pay attention to nature and to try to build with nature, and to have a purpose that was to keep them safe from the elements, but also to experience the elements. Like sometimes, like in these log cabins, like there's a layer of like an air pocket, and then they'd shove like some green moss in between that. But yet it was flexible, and you would still get a little bit of a draft, but that was something that was desirable, to have some of the outside coming in, like for the airflow. So it's just interesting how today we might look at that and be like, oh my gosh, that window leaks, or, you know, that's not a very tight casing around that window. We have to absolutely fix it. We don't want any airflow. And yet, you know, it just seems like more people that were simple, that lived close to the earth, they had a more respect for the earth, for nature, and they were living simpler with the cooking of their food, the gathering and, you know, gardening, the, you know, their needs were little, and they were more focused on God, having a relationship with their family and friends, and being able to provide true hospitality, as opposed to being like scatterbrained like many of us are, scrolling on Instagram, you know. So it's just interesting when you think about the simplicity of designs of these homes, you know, the wood materials, stone, a simple fireplace, that your fuel was firewood from the forest, and you know, that your entertainment was, you know, you're walking on your land, or you're, you know, you're creating something of memory based on that. So I'm going to stop here, and I'll pick up again and talk to you soon. Bye.